I want you to picture a scene. It's a Sunday morning. The sanctuary is packed. Totally standing room only.
Right. You can feel the heat.
Exactly. And down at the front, you've got this young couple. Maybe they're holding hands, looking a little terrified, but also just radiant. The pastor calls the elders forward. Everyone lays on hands. There are tears, big promises. It's the commissioning service.
It's such a powerful moment. It's
Yeah.
really one of the high points of church life.
It is. Then you cut to the airport. The whole hug fest at the gate, the "we're with you forever" promises. It feels, cinematic, like the climax of the movie.
It does feel like the climax, and that's usually where we roll the credits in our heads. Mission accomplished. They've gone.
They're on the plane.
But the sources we are looking at for this deep dive, they argue we have a massive blind spot here. Because in reality, that airport scene isn't the climax. It's just the opening credits.
Okay, but you have to start somewhere. I mean, if you don't get them on the plane, there is no mission. You need that launch.
True, you absolutely need the launch. But the argument here is all about what happens after the credits roll, when the actual movie starts.
Right.
The sources describe this quiet crisis that sets in about, let's say, 10 years later.
10 years. Wow, okay, the adrenaline has definitely worn off by then. What does that crisis look like?
Well, think about it. The applause has totally faded. Those supportive emails, they've trickled down to a monthly newsletter that, let's be honest.
Half the sitting church doesn't even open.
Oh.
Yeah, I am guilty of archiving those unread.
We all are. It's not malicious, it's just
Yeah.
life moves on here. And that is the core tension we need to unpack today.
Okay.
The source material puts it pretty bluntly. It says we are experts at starting mission. We love the momentum, the urgency, that let's go energy.
We're good at the launch.
We're great at the launch, but we are facing a profound failure in sustaining mission.
So good at the launch, bad at the orbit.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. The problem generally isn't a lack of passion. The people going aren't losing their faith or anything. The problem is that we haven't prepared them to stay. There is a phrase in the reading that just stopped me cold. It called this the quiet violence of unsustained calling.
Quiet violence. That's heavy. It sounds a little exaggerating. Violence, really.
It feels heavy, but I think it's really accurate. It's talking about the internal erosion, the soul damage that happens when you send someone out with massive zeal but zero infrastructure to keep that zeal alive.
So it's a violence against the soul to put it under a weight it wasn't built to carry?
Precisely. So our mission today is to figure out how we move from just sending to actually sustaining.
And I saw this name pop up a few times in the research, Eugene Peterson.
Yes. The guiding concept for all of this comes from a famous phrase of his, along obedience in the same direction.
Along obedience. I love that. And just a heads up for everyone listening, while our sources are focused on missionaries and the church, these insights about burnout and endurance are honestly applicable to anyone trying to stick with something hard for a long time.
Absolutely. If you're a parent, a teacher, a founder, this is for you.
So let's diagnose this. If we have the passion, why are we seeing this violence? Why are people burning out?
The sources point a finger at something they call the lone hero myth.
The lone hero, like some kind of cowboy riding into the sunset.
Basically, yes. It's a diagnosis of how our modern cultural values have just seeped into spiritual work. Think about the movies we watch. Who do we celebrate? The solitary figure who charges in, carries the weight of the world, and saves the day by themselves.
Sure, efficiency,
Yeah.
immediacy. The person who gets it done while everyone else is still in a meeting.
Right, and we want to know how quickly someone can get to the field. We celebrate the speed of deployment. It's this mentality of, drop them behind enemy lines and watch them go.
But isn't there something noble about that pioneer spirit? It feels courageous. We don't want a bunch of timid people, right?
It is courageous. You absolutely need courage. But courage without support just isn't sustainable. And the data on attrition people leaving the field, it proves it.
Yeah.
When missionaries crash or, return prematurely, the sources highlight that it is rarely because of persecution. It's not because the government kicked them out or the locals were hostile.
So it's not the dramatic external stuff, not the movie villain.
No. It's usually burnout,
Yeah.
cynicism, deep isolation. They run out of gas.
That poses a pretty uncomfortable question then.
It does. The authors ask, what if the greatest threat to mission isn't some government closing the borders? What if the greatest threat is our inability to just keep going?
We are our own worst enemy.
In a way. And this creates what the sources call a formation gap. We train people to go, we teach them how to raise money, maybe how to conjugate verbs in a new language.
The skills.
The skills, but we don't form them to endure.
Break that down for me. What's the difference between training and formation? Because in my head, they sound pretty similar.
Okay, think of it this way. Training is, here is how to use this tool. It's technical. It's about competency. Formation is, here's the kind of person you need to become so that using this tool doesn't destroy you. We teach them to preach, but we don't teach them how to be lonely. We don't teach them what to do when they work for 10 years and see, like, 0 results.
That distinction is huge. One is about skills, the other is about character and soul capacity.
Exactly. And that brings us to the pivot point of this entire discussion. If the lone hero is a myth that leads to burnout, what's the alternative?
What's the reality?
The sources argue we have to completely reframe the role of the sending church. We have to move from being sponsors to being shepherds.
Okay, let's unpack that, because I think a lot of churches, even really well-meaning ones, think their job is to write the check. They're the venture capitalist, and the missionary is the startup CEO.
Here's your seed funding. Go get us a return. That is precisely the transactional model the text critiques. In that model, the church is just a funding source or an event planner for that commissioning service. But the biblical model is the church as a co-laborer.
So how does that look different, practically?
Well, the deep dive looks at Philippians 4, where Paul is writing to his supporters. He doesn't say, hey, thanks for the cash, it helped with the rent. He describes their support as sharing in my trouble.
Sharing in my trouble. That feels very different than a transaction. That's heavy again.
It is. It's a partnership in suffering. It implies that the distance doesn't break the bond. And then you look at Acts 13, the church in Antioch. Paul and Barnabas are sent from a community of worship and fasting. They aren't freelancers. They're extensions of that body.
There's a term the source used that I wrote down because it felt so relevant, especially today. Structural amnesia.
Oh, this is a brilliant concept.
It sounds like a medical condition.
It's not medical, but it is sort of pathological. It describes how our systems, like those automated newsletters, the monthly financial reports, missions committees that only look at budgets, they inadvertently cause us to forget the human soul of the missionary.
So the system remembers the project but forgets the person.
That's it. The spreadsheet knows they are in country X, but nobody knows they are depressed.
Right.
The shift required here is moving from sending and forgetting to sending and shepherding. Sending isn't the finish line. It's the start of a covenant relationship.
So if we're going to stop forgetting them, what does that actually look like? The sources talk about the infrastructure of endurance. And the first pillar of that was surprising to me because it's something we talk about all the time, but apparently we're doing it wrong. Prayer.
Right. We tend to view prayer as like the garnish on the meal. It's nice to have. We'll pray for you.
Thoughts and prayers.
Exactly. But the source argues prayer is the infrastructure. Think steel beams in a skyscraper. It's what holds the whole mission together when the wind blows. The example given is from Acts 12, when Peter is in prison.
Yeah, Peter's in a maximum security situation. It looks hopeless. He's probably going to be executed.
And what is the church doing? They aren't just worrying. They aren't holding a strategy meeting. The text says they were earnestly praying. The Greek implies this kind of stretched out, intense, agonizing prayer.
So it wasn't a casual plus Peter today. It was labor.
It was work. And the danger the source points out is that prayer often peaks at that commissioning service we talked about.
Oh, yeah. Everyone prays then.
Everyone prays then. But 5 years in, when the missionary is in the long middle and nothing exciting is happening, that's when the prayer infrastructure usually crumbles.
And when the prayer crumbles, the sense of connection crumbles. The missionary feels isolated because the spiritual air cover is gone.
Correct. And that isolation is deadly. The other pillar of this infrastructure was mentorship. But not just, here's a manual on how to plant a church.
Right. The text called for pastoral bridges.
Mentorship beyond the honeymoon phase. We see this with Paul and Timothy. That wasn't a semester-long course. That was a lifelong apprenticeship. Paul talks about Timothy knowing his way of life, not just his doctrine.
Pastoral bridges. I like that image. But what does a bridge actually do in this context?
It helps you cross the gap between your expectation and your reality. Imagine you're in year 3. You're sick, your visa is denied, no one is listening to your message. The natural human reaction is, I failed.
Or, God has abandoned me. Yeah, I must have heard the call wrong.
Exactly. A pastoral bridge is a mentor who can say, no, this isn't failure. This is the cost of the calling. This is normal. Let's walk through it. Without that voice, people interpret delay as defeat.
They interpret suffering as a sign to quit.
That leads perfectly into the toolkit section of our sources. Because if you're going to survive year 3, you need more than just good intentions. You need a rule of life.
Now, I have to be honest, when I hear rule, I recoil a bit. It sounds rigid. It sounds like a list of things I'm not allowed to do.
You're not alone in that. To modern ears, rule sounds like a prison. But the source uses a different image. A trellis.
A trellis, like for gardening.
Exactly. Picture a tomato vine. If a vine doesn't have a trellis, a structure to climb on, what happens to it?
It just crawls along the ground, gets messy.
Right, it stays in the mud, it gets trampled, bugs eat it. And most importantly, it doesn't get enough sunlight to bear fruit. The trellis isn't there to restrict the plant, it lifts it up so it can actually do what it was made to do.
Okay, that helps. So a rule of life isn't about restriction, it's about support. It's the scaffold.
It's a structure for freedom. It's recognizing that zeal without rhythm leads to exhaustion. You can't live on adrenaline for 10 years. You need a trellis.
So what are the actual bars of this trellis? If I'm a missionary, or honestly just someone in a high-stress job, what makes up a rule of life?
It breaks down into a few core components. The first one is prayer, but specifically as a daily anchoring. It's the habit that keeps you tethered.
So not crisis prayer, but rhythm prayer.
Yes. Then there's community. The relational net. This is refusing to be the lone hero. You have to build bridges back home. You can't let yourself disappear.
Which means the church has to pick up the phone too.
Ideally, yes. Then there is rest. And this was a huge one in the text.
We're definitely going to dive deeper into rest in a minute because I think we get that wrong constantly. But what else is on the trellis?
Discernment, so learning to listen for God's timing. And finally, perseverance.
Perseverance seems like a result, not a habit. How do you do perseverance? Isn't that just not quitting?
This is the fascinating part. It's the idea of pre-deciding. You decide you are going to stay before things get hard.
Oh, that's smart. Because in the moment of crisis, your brain just wants to flee.
Exactly. If you wait until you are depressed and lonely to ask, should I stay? The answer will always be no. You make that decision while you are sane as part of your rule. The rule says we stay. So when the feelings say go, the rule holds you in place.
That's powerful. It takes the emotion out of the immediate decision.
The whole goal of the rule of life is to convert that abstract vision, I want to change the world, into daily habits. Because you can't live on vision, you live on habits.
This brings us to what I think is the most radical part of the source material. It redefines what success actually looks like. Because in the Lone Hero movie, success is the big victory. But here, success involves words like closed doors and hiddenness.
This is where we have to do some serious theological untangling. The source points to Acts 16. Paul, the greatest missionary ever, tries to go into Asia. It seems like a great idea.
Big population, huge need. Strategy-wise, it's a slam dunk.
But he doesn't go. The scripture says the Spirit prevented them, a closed door. And the source argues that sometimes the closed door is the mission. The waiting is the work.
We hate waiting. We want the montage where the door opens and the music swells.
But look at Jesus. We often skip over this. Jesus lived for 30 years in Nazareth.
Doing carpentry, paying bills.
Yeah.
Just live.
Hidden formation. 30 years of obscurity for 3 years of public ministry. The source drives this point home. Formation precedes fruit. You cannot rush people into leadership before they have roots.
If you skip the Nazareth years, you don't get the ministry of Jesus. You get a burnout statistic.
That leads to the topic of returning home. There is such a stigma around this. If a missionary comes back early, people whisper, "What went wrong? Did they fail?"
Yeah.
That stigma is toxic. And to dismantle it, the source looks at the story of Elijah in 1 Kings 19.
I love the story because Elijah is supposed to be like the Iron Man of prophets.
He is. He has just had the biggest spiritual victory of his career. He called down fire from heaven, defeated the prophets of Baal, the Mount experience.
Yeah, man.
And then he crashes hard. He hears a threat from Queen Jezebel and he runs. He's burned out, terrified, and honestly, the text implies he's suicidal. He asks God to take his life. He says, "I have had enough, Lord."
He's done. Tapped out.
Completely.
Yeah.
Now look at how God responds. If we were writing the script, we'd expect God to give him a pep talk. "Get up, Elijah. Where is your faith?"
Or hand him a new strategic plan.
Yeah.
Here are the KPIs for the next quarter.
Right. But God doesn't do any of that. God sends an angel, and the angel gives him food and water, and then, this is my favorite part, the angel lets him go back to sleep.
The divine prescription was a nap and a snack.
Twice. He wakes up, eats, and sleeps again. It is such a profound validation of our physical limits. We think spiritual problems always need spiritual solutions, but sometimes Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is take a nap.
That is incredibly freeing, because we act like our bodies are just these annoying vessels carrying our souls around.
Exactly. But the deeper lesson here is about destigmatizing the return. Jesus did this too. Mark 6.31, he sees his disciples are swamped, so busy they can't even eat. He doesn't say push through. He says, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest.
So we have to stop measuring faithfulness by how much we suffer.
There's a line in the source that really nails this. Faithfulness is measured by departure, not just perseverance. That's the lie we believe. We think the further you go and the longer you stay without a break, the more faithful you are.
But sometimes faithfulness looks like stopping.
Sometimes faithfulness is admitting you're empty. If we don't normalize the return, the break, the sabbatical, we force people to stay until they break. And a broken missionary is not a good witness to a God of grace.
A burned-out, cynical leader isn't showing the world what Jesus is like.
This completely reframes the goal. It's not about how many people we can blast out of a cannon into the mission field. It's about how we can help people live a life that sustains that calling.
That's the shift from spectacle to faithful presence. Spectacle is the big send-off. Faithful presence is just showing up, praying, and loving year after year, even when the applause has long since faded.
It reminds me of that farming analogy. You plant the seed and then nothing happens. At least nothing you can see. It's all underground. It's slow. But that's where the life is.
And if we constantly dig up the seed to check if it's growing, which is what our demand for constant updates feels like, we kill it.
We have to trust the soil. We have to trust the slow work of God.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've moved from the high energy of the airport goodbye to the quiet, sometimes grueling, but ultimately beautiful reality of the long obedience. From the lone hero to the trellis.
We have. And I think the source leaves us with a provocative thought that haunts me a little bit in a good way. It asks a personal question to the reader and really to all of us listening. What kind of life can actually carry the weight of a missionary calling?
It's not a question about strategy or funding. It's a question about the kind of life.
Exactly. It suggests that it's not about having a stronger faith in terms of willpower. It's about having a life structure, a trellis that can bear the weight. It's about forming people who can go the distance.
And that applies whether you are crossing an ocean or just trying to be faithful in your own neighborhood. It's about building a life that can endure the silence and the waiting.
It is. It's about showing up, faithful presence. It's about recognizing that the lone hero eventually collapses, but the community that prays, the person who rests, and the disciple who accepts the trellis, they endure.
Well, that gives us plenty to think about. Whether you're the one going, the one sending, or just someone trying to figure out how to keep going in your own long obedience, there's something here for you. Thanks for diving in with us.
Always a pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive. Keep building that trellis.